The first time I realized my family had already decided who I was allowed to be, it was standing in a courthouse hallway watching my younger sister cry into my mother's arms while no one noticed I was bleeding. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean actual blood running down my shin, soaking into the cuff of my work pants while everyone's attention stayed fixed on her. That was the day I learned something important. In my family, pain only mattered if it belonged to the right person. I'm telling you this now because what happened next did not begin with a wedding or a will or even a betrayal that made headlines. It began with a quiet decision made without me in the room, and by the time I understood it, my name had already been erased. My name is Claire Holloway. I was 31 years old when my life split cleanly down the middle before and after. Before, I was the reliable one, the fixer, the daughter who showed up early and stayed late. After, I was the problem everyone claimed they never saw coming. It was late November, the week before Thanksgiving, when my mother called with that tone she used when she had already made up her mind. "We need to talk," she said. Not hello, not how are you, just that. I was in my office downtown, a glass-walled conference room overlooking the river. I had stayed late again, finishing a proposal that wasn't even mine because my supervisor had family stuff, and I didn't. That was the story of my life. If I didn't have a husband or children yet, then my time must be extra something other people could borrow freely. "Can it wait?" I asked. "I'm still at work." There was a pause. I could picture her lips tightening. It shouldn't. I stepped into the stairwell and sat on the concrete steps, the phone pressed to my ear, the echo of my own breathing too loud in the silence. "Your sister is getting married," she said. I closed my eyes. Of course she was. Emily was 3 years younger than me and had always lived in faster colors. Louder laugh, bigger reactions. She fell in love hard and publicly, and when she fell apart, she did it the same way. Our parents treated her emotions like weather events. Dangerous, unpredictable, but never her fault. "That's great," I said carefully. "I thought they were still on a break." "They worked it out," my mother replied, brisk and final. "The wedding is in March." March. 4 months away. Plenty of time to plan. Plenty of time, I thought, for them to decide how inconvenient I might be. "And I need you to understand," she continued, "this is going to be a small, intimate ceremony." There it was. The warning disguised as information. "How small?" I asked. "Immediate family only," she said, "and a few close friends." I waited. The stairwell smelled like dust and old paint. My leg had gone numb. "And me?" I asked. Another pause, this one longer. "Claire," she said the way she always did when she was about to make me responsible for something that wasn't mine. "You've always had complicated feelings about Emily." I laughed once, short and sharp. "Complicated feelings? I paid her rent for 8 months last year." "That's not what I mean," she snapped. "You're critical. You ask questions. This day is not about you." There it was. The sentence that would follow me for the rest of this story. "This is about Emily's happiness," my mother said, "and we don't want any negativity." Negativity. That was the word they used when I pointed out things no one wanted to hear. Like why Emily's fiancé Mark seemed to change jobs every few months, but never seemed worried about money. Or why his business partners kept vanishing. Or why every time I asked what exactly he did, the answer slid sideways. I had noticed things, I always did, that was my curse. So I said slowly, "You're saying I'm not invited." "We haven't finalized anything yet," she replied. "But it might be best if you sit this one out." Sit this one out. I thought of Christmas 2 years earlier when I flew home and slept on the couch while Emily got the guest room, even though she arrived a day later. I thought of my 30th birthday, when my parents forgot to call until the next morning, and only because Emily reminded them. I thought of every family dinner where I cleared plates while everyone praised her latest plan, and I thought of how tired I was of swallowing it. "I've done nothing wrong," I said quietly. "This isn't about right or wrong," my mother replied. "This is about keeping the peace." We ended the call with the kind of politeness that only exists between people who are pretending nothing has just broken. I sat on the stairwell for a long time after that, my phone cold in my hand. Somewhere below me, a door slammed. Someone laughed. Life went on. That night, I opened my laptop and did what I always did when something felt off. I started looking. I wasn't searching for Mark, not consciously. I was researching a client, cross-checking corporate filings when his name popped up in a document linked to a limited liability company registered in Nevada. Same name, same middle initial. My stomach tightened. I clicked, then clicked again. The more I read, the quieter the room seemed to get. shell companies, dissolved entities, lawsuits quietly settled, financial trails that led nowhere and everywhere at once. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding. This wasn't jealousy, this wasn't negativity, this was danger. And the worst part was, I already knew how this would go. Because in my family, truth only mattered when it made them comfortable. I closed the laptop and stared at the dark screen, my reflection faint and distorted. 31 years old, smart, capable, invisible. I didn't know it yet, but that moment was the last calm breath before everything exploded. By the time March arrived, I would be erased from a wedding blamed for a collapse I tried to prevent, and handed a truth my family had buried for years. And by the end of it, they would all be calling my name. The question was whether I would answer. The first thing I learned after my mother's call was how quickly a family can rewrite you when you threaten their comfort. By December, the story had already changed. I wasn't not invited. I was too busy. I was traveling for work. I was supportive but distant. Those were the phrases my aunt used when she spoke to relatives, the ones I heard later through quiet side conversations and sympathetic looks. No one ever said the truth out loud, that I had been excluded, that I had been deemed a liability. I found out because my cousin Jenna texted me one night, a screenshot attached. Wedding shower invite, wish you were coming. My name wasn't on it. I stared at the image for a long time, the pastel flowers, the smiling fonts, Emily's name curled in gold letters at the top. It was being held at my mother's house, the same dining room where I used to sit at the corner, half listening, half invisible. I typed back slowly, I wasn't invited. There was a pause, then 3 dots, then nothing. Silence has a way of confirming things no one wants to say. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop again. I told myself it was curiosity, not obsession. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't about Mark anymore. It was about understanding why my family was so determined to protect him from scrutiny, even at the cost of pushing me out. I pulled tax records, business registrations, court filings buried under layers of legal language designed to discourage anyone from looking too closely. And the more I looked, the clearer the pattern became. Mark didn't build businesses, he passed through them. Money moved in circles, bouncing between companies that existed only on paper. Addresses led to empty offices or warehouses shared by a dozen other entities. Names repeated themselves, just slightly altered. A shell game. My hands were shaking when I closed my laptop. Not from fear, but from recognition. I had seen this before. Years earlier, when I worked briefly at a mid-sized consulting firm, we lost a client overnight. Federal investigation. Fraud. The signs were almost identical. Back then, I had been junior enough to be shielded from the fallout. Now I was seeing the same blueprint stitched into my sister's future. I called Emily the next morning. She answered on the 4th ring, breathless. "Claire, what's up?" Her voice was light, almost cheerful, like nothing was wrong, like I hadn't been cut out of one of the biggest days of her life. "We need to talk," I said. She sighed. "If this is about the wedding, I already told Mom I don't want drama." "This isn't drama," I replied. "This is about Mark." There it was, the shift. I could hear it even before she spoke. "What about him?" "I've been looking into his business dealings," I said carefully. "There are things you need to know." Her laugh came quick and sharp. "Oh my God, you really can't help yourself, can you?" I closed my eyes. "Emily, please, just listen." "You've always hated him," she snapped. "From the beginning." "That's not true. You don't like that he takes care of me," she said. "You don't like that I don't need rescuing anymore." The words stung because they were wrong in the most familiar way. I had never wanted to rescue Emily. I wanted her safe. "I'm not trying to control anything," I said. "I'm trying to protect you from what she demanded. Success. A man who loves me. You sound jealous." There it was, the accusation I had expected and still wasn't ready for. "I found court filings," I said, "linked companies, patterns consistent with financial crimes." She went quiet. For one fragile second, I thought maybe, just maybe, she was hearing me. Then she exhaled loudly. "You're unbelievable." "Emily, you always do this," she continued. "You find a way to make everything about you. This is my wedding, my life, and you're trying to ruin it. I'm trying to stop you from making a mistake." "You think I'm stupid," she shot back. "You think Mom and Dad are stupid? We've met his partners. We've seen his accounts. Have you—" I wanted to ask. "Or have you only seen what he wanted you to see?" But I didn't say it, because I already knew how this ended. "If you keep this up," Emily said, her voice trembling now, Don't come. I mean it. Stay away from the wedding. The line went dead. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, the phone still pressed to my ear. Outside, snow fell in slow, quiet sheets covering the street in white. Everything looked clean, untouched. I called my father next. He listened longer than my mother had, longer than Emily, long enough for me to feel a flicker of hope. Then he chuckled. "Claire," he said, "you've always had a vivid imagination." "This isn't imagination," I said. "This is documentation." "You're reading things the wrong way," he replied. "You've always been like that, too analytical. Not everything is a problem to solve." "So you're not concerned?" I asked. "I'm concerned about you," he said. "You're isolating yourself. You don't have a family of your own yet, and I think you fixate on ours." That hurt more than I expected. Not because it was new, but because it was old. A familiar weapon sharpened and reused. "I have a life," I said quietly. "Then live it," he replied, "and let your sister be happy." We hung up, and just like that, the door closed. By Christmas, my absence had been normalized. My parents sent me a card, generic and stiff. Emily posted photos online, smiling in front of the tree, Mark's arm wrapped tightly around her waist. The caption read, "So grateful for family." I wasn't in a single picture. On Christmas morning, I woke alone, brewed coffee, and watched the snow fall. I felt strangely calm, detached, like someone observing a storm from behind glass. But beneath that calm was something else, something steady and dangerous. Resolve. Because if my family refused to see the truth, I would stop trying to make them. I would document it, preserve it, let it speak for itself when the time came. I reached out to an old friend from law school, someone who now worked in regulatory compliance. I sent him a file. No commentary, just facts. He called me 2 days later. "This is bad," he said, "worse than you think." My heart pounded. "How bad?" "Enough that you should stop digging," he replied. "And enough that if this connects to your sister, she's in serious trouble." I looked at the Christmas tree lights blinking softly in the corner of my apartment, the ornaments I had unpacked out of habit more than joy. "I tried to warn them," I said. "I believe you," he replied. "But be careful. When families are invested in a lie, they protect it fiercely." After we hung up, I sat very still. March was 3 months away. And I had the sinking feeling that my family wasn't just choosing Mark over me. They were choosing the lie. January arrived with a kind of quiet cruelty. The holidays were over, the decorations packed away, and real life resumed as if nothing had shifted. But everything had. I could feel it in the way my phone stayed silent, in how my mother's weekly check-in calls stopped entirely, and how my sister blocked me on social media without saying a word. Blocked, just like that. I found out by accident when a coworker leaned over my desk one afternoon and said, "Your sister's wedding looks gorgeous already." I blinked. "What?" She turned her phone toward me, smiling. "The venue photos, the dress teaser, it's all over her page." I stared at the screen. Emily laughing in a white robe, champagne flute raised. A caption beneath it read, "Countdown to Forever." I felt something hollow open in my chest. "I can't see that," I said. My coworker frowned. "Really?" "No," I said quietly. "I can't." That was how I learned I'd been erased completely. Not just uninvited, not just excluded, deleted. That night, I sat alone in my apartment scrolling through old family photos stored on my laptop. Birthdays, holidays, graduations. In nearly every picture, Emily was centered, brightly lit arms wrapped around someone. I was usually half a step to the side, cropped awkwardly, or missing entirely. I wondered how I'd never noticed before. The truth is, favoritism doesn't announce itself. It settles in slowly like dust. You don't see it until you try to wipe it away. Work became my refuge. Long hours, quiet focus, the illusion of control. My supervisor praised my dedication, hinting at a promotion that had been dangled in front of me twice before and quietly handed to someone else. Still, I showed up. I always did. Then one afternoon, 2 weeks into January, everything cracked again. I was pulled into a meeting room by human resources. No warning, no context. "We've received a complaint," the woman across from me said gently, her hands folded on the table. "About your conduct." My stomach dropped. "What kind of complaint?" She slid a printed email toward me. It was from Mark, or rather from one of his companies. The accusation was vague but damning. That I had accessed confidential information, that I had been spreading false claims, that I was attempting to sabotage a private business relationship. I stared at the page, my name typed neatly in the subject line. "This is ridiculous," I said. "I've never interacted with him professionally." "We understand," she replied, but given the nature of the allegations, we need to conduct a review. A review. Another word that sounded neutral and wasn't. I walked back to my desk in a daze. My hands shook as I gathered my things. Coworkers avoided my eyes. Whispers followed me like shadows. By the end of the day, I was placed on administrative leave. I sat in my car in the parking garage, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers hurt. I knew exactly what this was. Retaliation. Mark didn't just want to marry into my family. He wanted to silence me. That night, my father called for the first time in weeks. "What did you do?" he demanded, not even bothering with hello. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "I just got a call," he snapped. "From Mark. He said you're trying to destroy him, that you're harassing his business partners." I laughed, a brittle sound that surprised even me. "So now you believe him?" "He wouldn't lie about something like this," my father said. "Not with lawyers involved." "Lawyers." My pulse roared in my ears. "Did it ever occur to you," I said slowly, "that this proves exactly what I've been trying to tell you?" "You've gone too far," he replied. "You're embarrassing the family." There it was again. The family, the image, the lie they were willing to sacrifice me to protect. "If you keep this up," he said, "don't bother coming home, ever." The line went dead. I sat in my car long after the call ended, the engine off, the air stale. I felt stripped bare, job in jeopardy, family gone, reputation under attack. And yet beneath the fear, something else stirred. Clarity. Because for the first time, Mark wasn't hiding anymore. He was showing his hand. The next morning, I called the lawyer my friend had recommended weeks earlier. Her name was Rachel Moore. She listened without interrupting as I explained everything from the wedding to the complaint to the financial records. When I finished, there was a pause. "You need to stop acting alone," she said finally. "And you need to understand something." What I asked. "You're not the problem," she said. "You're the threat." That sentence settled into me like a weight and a relief all at once. She continued, "People don't react this aggressively unless they have something to lose." I looked around my apartment at the quiet life I'd built piece by piece. "What do I do?" "For now," she said, "you document everything. Every call, every message, every attempt to intimidate you. And you stay quiet." Quiet. The opposite of what my family accused me of being. "And the wedding?" I asked. Rachel exhaled. "If they're willing to cut you out this completely, something bigger is happening. Let it happen." After we hung up, I sat by the window and watched the city wake up. Snowplows scraped the streets. People hurried past bundled in coats, unaware of the storm gathering inside my family. I checked my email. Another message from HR. The investigation would take weeks. Weeks. Long enough for the wedding to happen. Long enough for the lie to be celebrated. I thought of Emily smiling in her robe, blissfully unaware or willfully blind. I thought of my parents clinging to the image of success they'd always valued more than truth. And I realized something that scared me with its calm certainty. If I spoke now, I would be destroyed. If I waited, the truth might destroy them. I closed my laptop, stood up, and made a decision that would change everything. I would stop warning them. I would let them choose. By February, my silence had become its own kind of weapon. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't correct the stories being told about me. I let my absence do the talking, even when it hurt more than I expected. The investigation at work dragged on, slow and suffocating. Every few days, another polite email from Human Resources landed in my inbox, asking for patience, for cooperation, for trust in the process. Meanwhile, I was locked out of systems I'd helped build, my name quietly removed from meetings and projects. I spent my days at home, pacing between the couch and the kitchen table, replaying conversations in my head. There were moments when I wondered if my family was right, if I had pushed too hard, if I had imagined patterns that weren't there. Then another letter arrived. This one wasn't from work. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. I opened it with trembling hands. The letter was carefully worded, sterile and threatening in the way only lawyers manage. It accused me of defamation, of interfering with contractual relationships. It demanded I cease and desist any further harassment of Mark Reynolds or his associated entities. Mark Reynolds. Seeing his full name in print made my stomach twist. I read the letter twice, then a third time, anger replacing fear. He was escalating. I forwarded it to Rachel immediately. Her reply came an hour later. "Good. This helps us." "Helps us." The phrase steadied me. She called that afternoon. "This letter tells me he's nervous," she said. "People who are clean don't send threats this early." "So what now?" I asked. "Now we wait," she replied, "and we prepare." Waiting didn't come naturally to me. I was used to action, to fixing things before they broke completely. But Rachel was right. Every move I made now would be watched, twisted, used against me. So I waited. And I watched. Emily's wedding planning went into overdrive. Even blocked, I heard about it. Through coworkers, through distant relatives, through social media posts forwarded by people who assumed I was still in the loop. There was a tasting, a dress fitting, a destination bachelorette weekend. I wasn't invited to any of it. My mother called once in mid-February, her voice oddly formal. "We've told people you're busy with work," she said, "out of town." I said nothing. "That's fine, right?" she pressed. "Say whatever you want," I replied. She inhaled sharply. "You're being difficult." "No," I said, "I'm being honest." She hung up on me. The night before Valentine's Day, I found myself scrolling through old messages on my phone, back when Emily still texted me daily. I stopped at one from years earlier. "I don't know what I'd do without you. You're the only one who really sees me." I stared at the words until they blurred. The irony was almost unbearable. That same night, Rachel emailed again. "There's more. I need you to come in." Her office was small and unassuming, tucked between a bakery and a dry cleaner. Inside, it smelled faintly of coffee and paper. She spread documents across the desk, her expression serious. "I ran deeper checks on Reynolds and his associates," she said. "Some of these companies are already under federal scrutiny." My heart skipped. "Federal?" She nodded, quietly, "Nothing public yet." I thought of the letter. The complaint at work. The sudden aggression. "They're closing in," she continued. "And your sister's wedding is about to put him in the spotlight." A chill ran through me. "This isn't just about money," Rachel said. "This could get very ugly very fast." I leaned back in the chair, my pulse racing. "What happens to my family?" She met my eyes. "If they're financially entangled with him, they could lose everything." The words landed like a physical blow. My parents had invested in Mark's ventures. I knew that much. They'd mentioned it casually, proudly, as proof of his legitimacy. I warned them, I thought. I warned them all. Should I tell them again, I asked, even as I knew the answer. Rachel shook her head slowly. "You already did. Multiple times. If you go back now, they'll accuse you of sabotage." I swallowed hard. She softened. "This is the part that's hardest. Watching people you love walk into something you can't stop." I left her office feeling hollow and heavy. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You should stop before you hurt everyone you care about." No signature, no explanation. A threat. I forwarded it to Rachel without replying. That night, I dreamed of a house collapsing from the inside. Walls falling, floors giving way, while people inside smiled and clinked glasses unaware. March arrived with early spring rain. 3 weeks to the wedding. I received my final notice from work 2 days later. The investigation found no evidence of wrongdoing on my part. The complaint was unsubstantiated, but my position had been eliminated due to restructuring. I read the email slowly, carefully. Eliminated, another clean word for erasure. I packed my things from the office the next morning in a cardboard box. No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. As I walked out, my phone rang. "Emily." I almost didn't answer. Almost. "What do you want?" I asked. She sounded tense, breathless. "Mom said you've been telling people lies." I laughed softly. "I haven't told anyone anything." "Mark says otherwise," she snapped. "Mark also said he was transparent," I replied. "And look how that's going." Her breath caught. "Why can't you just be happy for me?" The question was so familiar it hurt. "I wanted you safe," I said. "I still do." "Well, I don't need you," she said coldly. "And neither does my wedding." The line went dead. I stood in my empty apartment, box of belongings at my feet, rain streaking down the window. For the first time in my life, I had nothing left to lose. And somewhere beneath the grief, a dangerous thought took root. If they were determined to erase me, I would let the truth remember them. Losing my job should have broken me. Instead, it cleared something. The morning after I packed my desk into a cardboard box, I woke up without an alarm for the first time in years. No calendar alerts, no emails demanding urgency, no role to perform for people who only valued me when I was useful. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain tap softly against the window, and realized something unsettling. I was free. Not safe, not happy, but free. By then my family had fully closed ranks. Group chats went silent. Invitations stopped coming. My name was no longer mentioned unless it was followed by concern-laced criticism. "Claire is spiraling. Claire is obsessed. Claire always does this when she's lonely." That last one stung the most because it carried a grain of truth twisted into a weapon. I was alone. But not because I was unlovable. Because I had refused to play along. I spent the next week doing what I had never allowed myself to do before. I slowed down. I cooked real meals. I took long walks through my neighborhood, noticing things I'd rushed past for years. The elderly woman who fed pigeons every morning. The corner cafe where the owner always remembered orders. Ordinary life steady and honest. At night, though, the quiet turned sharp. That was when the doubts crept in. What if I was wrong? What if Mark was just sloppy, not criminal? What if I had destroyed my family for nothing? Every time that thought surfaced, I pulled up the files again. The transactions, the shell companies, the cease and desist letter, the anonymous threat. Facts didn't care about feelings. 2 weeks before the wedding, Rachel called with urgency in her voice. "They've accelerated," she said. "Reynolds is moving assets." My heart skipped. "Why now?" "Because the window is closing," she replied. "Weddings bring scrutiny, public records, financial disclosures." "And my parents?" I asked. There was a pause. "They're exposed." I sank onto the couch, the weight of it pressing into my chest. How bad? "Bad enough that when this breaks," she said carefully, "they'll look for someone to blame." I didn't need to ask who. That afternoon, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. I hadn't seen her in a person since Christmas. She stood in the hallway, perfectly dressed as always, pearls at her throat, expression tight with restrained emotion. She didn't hug me. "You look tired," she said. "So do you," I replied. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited, glancing around like she was inspecting damage. Her eyes landed on the packed boxes I hadn't unpacked yet. "What's this?" she asked. "I was laid off," I said simply. She frowned. "Because of all this nonsense." I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. "No," I said. "Because Mark filed a complaint against me." Her eyes flashed. "He said you were harassing him." "He lied," I replied. She waved a hand dismissively. "This is exactly what I mean. You escalate everything." I stared at her. Really stared. At the woman who raised me, who taught me to be responsible, to be careful, to tell the truth, and who was now asking me to deny it. "What do you want?" I asked. She exhaled sharply. "I want this to stop. I want you to apologize." "For what?" "For spreading suspicion," she snapped. "For putting ideas in people's heads. For making Emily anxious before her wedding." I laughed softly. "You blocked me from the wedding." "That was Emily's decision," she said quickly. "You supported it." She didn't deny it. "You chose him," I said quietly, "over me." Her face hardened. "We chose peace." "No," I replied, "you chose comfort." Silence filled the room thick and heavy. Finally, she said, "If something happens, if this all blows up, you will be responsible." The words landed exactly where she intended, a final attempt to tether me to their outcome. I stood up. "If something happens," I said, "it will be because you ignored every warning." She stared at me like I was a stranger. "You've changed," she said. "Yes," I replied, "I have." She left without another word. That night, I sat on the floor of my living room, my back against the couch, and cried for the family I wished I had, for the version of my mother who might have protected me, for the sister who once trusted me. I let myself mourn fully without minimizing it, without pretending it didn't hurt. And when the tears finally dried, something else remained. Resolve. The next morning, Rachel emailed again. "Federal interest is increasing. Do not contact them. Do not warn them again." I didn't. The wedding was 5 days away. Emily posted a final countdown on social media. Smiling, radiant, surrounded by friends and family. My parents appeared in several photos, beaming with pride. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't mentioned. I watched from the outside like a ghost. The night before the ceremony, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Tomorrow changes everything. Hope you're ready." I didn't reply. I powered my phone off and went to bed early, the city quiet outside my window. As I lay there in the dark, I realized something that should have terrified me, but didn't. Whatever happened tomorrow, I would no longer be invisible. And once the truth surfaced, no one would be able to erase me again. The morning of the wedding arrived clear and bright, the kind of deceptive calm that makes disasters feel impossible. I woke before dawn, my body tense, as if it already knew what the day would bring. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then memory flooded back in sharp pieces. The exclusion, the threats, the silence, the countdown I had watched from the outside. I made coffee and stood by the window, the city slowly waking below. Somewhere across the state, my sister was stepping into a white dress, surrounded by people who believed they were celebrating a beginning. Somewhere, my parents were straightening their clothes, rehearsing smiles, convinced they had protected their family by pushing me out. I had not been invited, but I had not been uninvolved. At 9 in the morning, my phone buzzed to life again. I had powered it on only to check for one thing: an email from Rachel. It was short. "It's starting." My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I sat down at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around my mug, coffee forgotten. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. For weeks now, I had lived with the knowledge that something was moving beneath the surface, unseen but unstoppable. 10 minutes later, another email. Federal agents arrived at the venue early. Low profile. Do not engage. I stared at the screen, my breath shallow. They were there. The wedding wasn't until noon. Guests would be arriving soon, laughing, hugging, oblivious. Emily would be in a back room somewhere, nerves fluttering, probably texting friends about how perfect everything looked. And outside, the truth was already waiting. I thought I would feel triumph. I didn't. What I felt was a strange, aching stillness. Like the moment before a storm breaks, when the air goes heavy and quiet and every instinct tells you to brace. At 10:30, my phone started ringing. My mother. I watched it buzz across the table, the screen lighting up with her name. I didn't answer. It rang again and again. Then my father. Then Emily. The calls stacked up one after another until the phone stopped vibrating and went still. I knew better than to think it was over. At 11:15, a text came through from an unknown number. "They're here. What did you do?" I deleted it without replying. At 11:30, Rachel called. Her voice was calm but tight. "They're executing warrants." My throat closed. "On the venue. And on multiple associated properties," she said, "including a warehouse tied to Reynolds Companies." I closed my eyes. "They're being careful," she continued, "but this will not stay quiet." I pictured the scene without seeing it. Black vehicles parked discreetly at first. Men and women who did not look like guests, standing just a little too alert. Phones being put away, smiles faltering. "What about my family?" I asked. There was a pause. "Your parents are being questioned," Rachel said. "Financial entanglements." I exhaled slowly, my hands trembling. "And Emily?" Another pause, longer this time. "She hasn't been detained," Rachel said. "Yet." "Yet," the word echoed. We ended the call, and I sat there in my small kitchen, the sunlight streaming in the ordinary world continuing around me. A delivery truck passed outside. A neighbor laughed on the sidewalk. And somewhere else, everything was unraveling. At 12:05, my phone exploded. Calls, messages, voicemails piling up so fast the screen lagged. I let it ring. At 12:10, a news alert flashed across my screen. "Federal investigation disrupts private ceremony outside the city." My pulse roared in my ears. At 12:15, a video link was sent to me by a coworker I hadn't spoken to since my layoff. "Is this your family?" My hands shook as I opened it. The footage was shaky, filmed on a phone. White chairs scattered across a manicured lawn. A floral arch half assembled. Guests standing in clusters, confused, murmuring. And in the background, men in dark jackets moving with purpose. Then the camera panned. I saw my father first. His face was red, his mouth open mid-shout, one hand raised as if arguing with someone just out of frame. My mother stood beside him, her expression frozen in disbelief, her clutch dangling from her fingers. Then the camera swung again. Emily. She was still in her robe, hair, half done, makeup unfinished. Her mouth was open, eyes wide, mascara already smudging as she clutched Mark's arm. Mark. He didn't look like the man I'd seen in engagement photos. His face was pale, his jaw tight, eyes darting wildly as two agents stepped closer. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I didn't need to. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a mistake. At 12:20, the video cut abruptly. My phone rang again. "Emily." Against every instinct, I answered. "What did you do?" she screamed. The sound of chaos roared behind her. Voices, crying, someone shouting orders. "I warned you," I said quietly. "You ruined my life," she sobbed. "You're sick, you're jealous. You wanted this." "No," I replied. "I tried to stop it." "You did this," she screamed. "You told someone, you destroyed everything." I closed my eyes, pain slicing through me, sharp and clean. "I didn't do this," I said. "He did." She laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. "They're saying he's a criminal. That he lied. That the money's gone. Mom and Dad are freaking out. This can't be real." "It is," I said. She inhaled sharply, her voice dropping. "Fix it." The word hit me harder than any insult. "Fix it," like I always had. "I can't," I said, "and I won't." There was a beat of silence, then her voice turned cold. "You're dead to me." I hung up. My phone buzzed again immediately, but I didn't look. I set it face down on the table and stood, my legs unsteady. Outside, the day was still beautiful. Inside me, something finally broke free. I hadn't won, I hadn't taken revenge, I had survived. And as sirens wailed faintly in the distance, carried by the wind from somewhere far away, I understood something with absolute clarity. This was only the beginning. The silence after the chaos was louder than anything that came before it. I stood in my kitchen long after I ended the call with Emily, my phone face down on the table like a live wire I refused to touch. Outside, the city carried on indifferent and unaware. Somewhere a siren faded into the distance. Somewhere else my family's carefully constructed world lay in pieces on a manicured lawn. I thought I would feel vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. The first voicemail came from my mother less than 5 minutes later. Her voice was unrecognizable, thin and frantic, stripped of its practiced composure. "Claire, please," she sobbed. "Something terrible is happening. The accounts, the investments, they're saying, everything is frozen. We need you. You understand this stuff. Please call me back." I deleted it without listening to the rest. The second voicemail was from my father. His tone was different, sharp, accusatory. "This is your fault," he said. "You couldn't let things go. You always have to be right. If our family is destroyed, it's on you." I deleted that one too. By the time the third message came through from an aunt I hadn't spoken to in years, I powered the phone off completely. For the first time in my life, I chose silence without guilt. I didn't leave my apartment that day. I made tea I didn't drink and sat by the window watching clouds drift across the sky. Every few minutes, my mind tried to drag me back to the image of Emily's face twisted with disbelief and rage. Each time I let the thought pass. I had spent decades absorbing their emotions, carrying their chaos, fixing their mistakes. I was done. That evening, Rachel called. "You did the right thing by not engaging," she said. "They're in panic mode. Panic makes people dangerous." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," she replied, "the investigation goes public." As if on cue, my laptop chimed with a news alert. I opened it slowly, bracing myself. The headline was worse than I imagined. "Federal raid interrupts private ceremony amid fraud investigation." Below it, photos. The venue. Agents. Guests shielding their faces. My parents, unmistakable, caught mid-argument, dignity stripped away by a single still frame. I scrolled further. Sources confirmed that multiple shell companies connected to the groom are under investigation for financial crimes, including fraud and money laundering. My stomach tightened. And then the line that made my breath catch. Family members reportedly invested significant personal assets into the groom's ventures. I closed the laptop. They had tied themselves to him completely, not just emotionally, financially, publicly. And now they were exposed. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. 97 missed calls. Voicemails stacked like debris after a flood. Messages from cousins, old family friends, even people I barely recognized, all suddenly desperate to reach me. One message stood out. "We need to talk. This is bigger than feelings now." It was from my father. I didn't reply. Instead, I showered, dressed, and went for a long walk. The air was cool and clean, spring finally asserting itself. I passed a park where children played, their laughter ringing out unburdened by adult consequences. For a moment, I envied them. Then I didn't. By the time I returned home, Rachel had emailed again. "Your parents have retained counsel. They are looking for someone to mitigate damages. They will come to you." The words felt less like a warning and more like confirmation. That afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I knew before I opened it. My mother stood in the hallway, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed pearls missing for the first time I could remember. My father hovered behind her, his posture rigid, jaw clenched. "Please," my mother said, "just let us in." I hesitated, then stepped aside. They sat on the couch like strangers, hands folded, eyes darting around my apartment as if looking for something to anchor them. "We didn't know," my mother began. "You have to believe that." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I told you." She flinched. "We didn't think it was real." My father cleared his throat. "Mark deceived us." "Yes," I said, "he did." And now my mother continued, her voice cracking. "Everything we had is tied up. The accounts, the house, the retirement fund, they froze it all." I said nothing. "We need help," she whispered. "Your help!" There it was, the ask that had defined our relationship. "I warned you," I said quietly, multiple times. My father's face hardened. "This isn't the time to gloat." "I'm not," I replied. "I'm stating facts." He stood abruptly. "If you had just kept your mouth shut." "No," I cut in, my voice steady. "If you had listened." Silence fell between us, heavy and charged. My mother looked at me, then really looked, as if seeing me for the first time in years. "What do you want?" she asked. The question startled me. "What do you mean?" "What will it take," she said, "for you to help us?" I considered her words carefully. For decades I had wanted apologies, recognition, love offered without conditions. But standing there, I realized something startling. I didn't want anything from them anymore. I'm not your solution, I said. I won't fix this. My father stared at me, incredulous. You can't just abandon your family. I was abandoned first, I replied. My mother's shoulders slumped. So that's it. Yes, I said it is. They left without another word. That night I slept deeply for the first time in months. The following days were a blur of headlines and speculation. Mark was formally charged. Emily retreated from public view. My parents' financial situation became fodder for gossip. Through it all, I remained silent, until one email arrived that changed everything. It was from a law firm representing my grandmother's estate. The subject line read, "Clarification regarding testamentary documents." My heart pounded as I opened it. Inside was a brief message requesting a meeting. There had been questions raised, it said, about the validity of certain documents following recent events. I stared at the screen, a chill creeping up my spine. Another secret. Another lie. And suddenly I understood. This story wasn't just about a wedding. It was about everything my family had taken from me. And now the truth was coming for that too. The email from the law firm sat in my inbox like a loaded question. I read it 3 times before it fully registered. Clarification. Testamentary documents. Questions raised. The language was careful, neutral, but beneath it was a tremor I recognized. Something had shifted. Something buried was being disturbed. My grandmother, Ruth Holloway, had died 4 years earlier. I remembered the day clearly. A gray afternoon. A phone call from my mother that sounded almost relieved. "Grandma left everything to your father and your aunt," she'd said. "You know how traditional she was." I had accepted that explanation without protest. At the time, I was still trying to earn my place in the family, still believing fairness might eventually find me if I stayed patient. Now, reading that email, I felt something cold slide into place. I called the number listed and scheduled a meeting for the following afternoon. The law office was old, tucked into a brick building that smelled faintly of lemon polish and history. The attorney who greeted me was a woman in her early 60s, silver hair pulled back neatly, eyes sharp but kind. "I'm Margaret Lewis," she said. "I handled parts of your grandmother's estate." We sat across from each other at a polished table. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating dust motes in the air. "Why am I here?" I asked. She folded her hands. "Because recent financial investigations have required us to review related legal documents. During that review, inconsistencies surfaced." My heart pounded. "Inconsistencies with what?" "With the will presented by your parents," she replied. "Specifically whether it was the final version." The room felt suddenly too warm. "What are you saying?" I asked. Margaret reached into a folder and slid a document across the table. "This," she said, "is a copy of an earlier draft of your grandmother's will." I scanned it quickly. My father's name, my aunt's, assets divided neatly between them. "And this," she continued, placing a second document beside it, "is the final signed and notarized version." My breath caught. My name was there. Not a footnote, not a token mention. Primary beneficiary. The house in Maine, the trust fund, shares in the family-owned manufacturing company my grandfather had built decades earlier. "I don't understand," I whispered. Margaret's expression softened. "Your grandmother amended her will 6 months before she passed. She cited concerns about financial judgment and favoritism. She wanted to ensure you were protected." Protected. The word echoed. Why didn't I know? I asked. She hesitated. "Your mother was present when the final will was signed." The silence between us stretched. "She told us the older version was the last," Margaret continued. "At the time, there was no reason to suspect otherwise. Until now." I stared at the documents, my hands trembling. "They hid this," I said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Margaret replied quietly. "It appears so." I left the office in a daze. On the drive home, memories resurfaced with brutal clarity. The way my mother dismissed my questions after Grandma died. The way my father insisted everything was settled. The casual certainty with which they had erased me from inheritance, just as they erased me from weddings and photos and conversations. It hadn't been neglect. It had been strategy. That night I didn't cry. I sat at my kitchen table and let the truth settle into me, heavy and undeniable. For years I had believed I was overlooked because I was less important, less loved, less deserving. The reality was far worse. They had known my worth all along. They had been afraid of it. The next morning my phone rang. "Emily." I almost didn't answer. Almost. "What now?" I asked. Her voice was hoarse, exhausted. "They're saying the house might be seized. Mom's hysterical. Dad won't stop yelling." I listened without responding. "There's something else," she continued, quieter now. "A lawyer called, about Grandma's will. My grip tightened, and they said you're involved. I exhaled slowly, because I am. Silence. You knew, she whispered. I didn't, I said. Until yesterday. Another pause, then defensive. Mom said Grandma changed her mind, that she didn't want to cause drama. I laughed softly without humor. Funny how drama always seems to benefit you. That's not fair, Emily snapped. I didn't ask for any of this. No, I agreed. You just accepted it. Her breath hitched. So what are you going to do? The question felt heavy with implication. For years, I had asked myself that same thing in different forms. What are you going to do when they hurt you again? When they dismiss you? When they choose someone else? This time the answer came easily. I'm going to let the truth stand, I said, in court if necessary. You can't, she said. It'll destroy them. They destroyed themselves, I replied. You're enjoying this, she accused. I thought of the job I lost, the wedding I wasn't invited to, the years of being made small. No, I said. I'm done sacrificing myself to protect people who never protected me. She hung up. That afternoon, Margaret emailed again. We will be filing to reinstate the final will. There may be resistance. Be prepared. Resistance. I almost smiled. For the first time, the fight wasn't about being heard. It was about letting documented truth do its work. My parents tried to call that evening. I didn't answer. Instead, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window as the sun dipped below the skyline. The city glowed gold and pink, indifferent to my personal reckoning. I thought of my grandmother, her steady gaze, the way she used to press a cookie into my hand when she thought no one was looking. She had seen me, even when my parents chose not to. As night fell, a sense of calm settled over me. Not joy, not revenge, something deeper, justice. And I knew without doubt that this was the moment everything truly turned. Not because I was taking something from them, but because I was finally taking myself back. The first official letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, thick paper-heavy envelope, my name typed in careful black ink. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the counter while I made coffee, while I fed the sourdough starter. I'd started keeping out of boredom while I stood at the window and watched a man across the street struggle to parallel park. Ordinary things, grounding things, because I already knew what was inside. War. When I finally slit the envelope open, the words were exactly as Margaret had predicted. My parents, through their attorney, were contesting the reinstatement of my grandmother's final will. They claimed undue influence, confusion, emotional manipulation in her final months. They were rewriting history again, only this time it was on paper under oath. I read the letter twice, then set it down and laughed. A slow, humorless sound that startled even me. Undue influence. From me. I had visited my grandmother once a week near the end. Yes. I brought her groceries, sat with her, listened, held her hand when arthritis made it ache. I didn't talk about money. I didn't know there was money to talk about. But my parents knew how to spin care into control. They had done it to me my entire life. By noon, Rachel had called. They're going aggressive, she said. This is about leverage now. They're drowning financially, and this is the only lifeline they see. So they're willing to burn Grandma's memory to save themselves, I said. Rachel didn't argue. They're also implying, she continued carefully, that you acted out of resentment, that you felt excluded from the family and retaliated. I leaned back in my chair. Let me guess, they're calling me unstable. Yes, she admitted, in more polite terms. I closed my eyes. For years, whenever I reacted to unfairness, I was labeled emotional, dramatic, difficult. They had trained everyone, including me, to doubt my own perceptions. Do they have anything real, I asked? Rachel exhaled. No, but they don't need real, they need noise. Noise, doubt, delay. Classic tactics. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. 3 weeks of waiting, wondering, and watching my family twist themselves into shapes I barely recognized. Emily called 2 days later. Her voice was different now, quieter, less sharp. They're saying you planned all of this, she said. That you set Mark up, that you turned Grandma against them. I didn't, I replied. I know, she said quickly, then hesitated. I think. That pause said everything. Why are you calling, I asked. She swallowed. Because everything's gone. The money, the wedding deposits. My friends won't answer. And Mom cries all the time. Dad barely sleeps. I felt a flicker of pity, real pity, and then it faded. You cut me out, I said calmly. You blocked me. You told me I was dead to you. I was scared, she whispered. So was I replied. I just wasn't protected. Silence stretched between us. They say if you just back off, she said finally. If you drop the will claim, things could go back to normal. Normal. The word felt almost obscene. There is no normal to go back to, I said. Only what comes next. You're really going to do this, she said. Take everything. I corrected her gently. I'm taking nothing that wasn't already given to me. She hung up without another word. The days blurred together after that. Legal prep, emails, long conversations with Margaret about timelines and evidence. I learned things I hadn't known before. That my grandmother had documented her concerns in writing. That she'd worried openly about favoritism, about my parents' financial recklessness, about me being left unprotected. She was very clear, Margaret said during one call. This wasn't impulsive, it was intentional. That word settled into my bones. Intentional. Meanwhile, the public fallout from the wedding scandal continued. Mark's name became shorthand for greed and deception. Articles speculated about accomplices. Comment sections were brutal. My parents' names began to appear alongside his, not as suspects but as cautionary examples. Trusted the wrong man, ignored red flags, lost everything. I wondered if they still believed it was my fault. The night before the hearing, my father left me a voicemail. His voice was hoarse, tired, stripped of its authority. You don't have to do this, he said. You're my daughter. I listened to the entire message, then deleted it. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wooden benches, neutral walls, a judge who looked bored before we even began. My parents sat on one side with their attorney. They looked older, smaller. My mother avoided my eyes. My father stared straight ahead, jaw tight. I took my seat beside Margaret. The proceedings were dry, technical. Dates, signatures, expert testimony about capacity and intent. Then came the moment I hadn't prepared for. My mother took the stand. She spoke softly, tearfully, about how close she'd been to her mother, about how fragile Grandma had been near the end, about how I'd inserted myself during that time. I watched her perform grief like a familiar play. Then Margaret stood. Mrs. Holloway, she said evenly, were you present when the final will was signed? My mother hesitated. Yes. Did you read it? Yes. Did you inform your daughter of its contents? No. Why not? My mother glanced at me for the first time. Her eyes were hard. I didn't want to hurt the family. The judge leaned forward. And by family, Margaret asked, you meant everyone except the named beneficiary. Silence fell like a held breath. The judge's gaze sharpened. In that moment, I felt something shift in the room. Not triumph, truth. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't explaining myself. I was being believed. The ruling didn't come that day. Court never gives you clean endings on schedule. Instead, it gives you pauses, suspensions, long stretches where you're forced to sit with the consequences already set in motion but not yet named. The judge took the matter under advisement, which meant waiting. Again, I walked out of the courthouse into pale afternoon light, my legs shaky, in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Reporters lingered at the steps drawn by the wedding scandal and the inheritance twist now leaking into public records. I kept my head down and walked past them, the click of cameras following me like insects. Margaret placed a steady hand on my shoulder once we were a block away. You did well, she said. I didn't do anything, I replied. She smiled slightly. Exactly. The waiting period lasted 12 days. 12 days of my parents' attorney filing supplemental briefs, 12 days of Emily oscillating between rage and desperation. 12 days of my phone lighting up with messages I didn't answer. My mother sent emails this time, long ones, carefully written. I never meant to hurt you. I was protecting the family. You don't understand how hard it is to hold everything together. I read them once, then archived them. My father didn't write. He sent short, clipped texts instead. This ends if you stop. Think about what you're doing to us. You're not the only one who lost something. I didn't reply to those either. Loss had always been framed as a competition in my family. Whoever hurt most got priority. Whoever spoke last got truth. I was done competing. Emily, on the other hand, couldn't stay quiet. She showed up at my apartment on the 8th day. I opened the door and found her standing there in oversized sunglasses, hair pulled into a messy knot, shoulders hunched like she was bracing for impact. Can we talk? She asked. I stepped aside without answering. She walked in slowly, as if expecting to be thrown out at any second. The apartment was quiet, sunlight pooling on the floor. No photos of family, no reminders of what we used to be. She sank onto the couch and pulled the sunglasses off. Her eyes were red-rimmed, shadowed. They're going to lose the house, she said. I leaned against the counter. That's what happens when you invest everything in a lie. Her mouth twisted. You sound just like their lawyers. No, I said. I sound like someone who told the truth early and often. She flinched. I didn't know, she said again, weaker this time. You knew enough, I replied. You just didn't want to hear it. She looked down at her hands. Do you know what it's like, she whispered, to realize your whole life was built on smoke? I considered her question carefully. Yes, I said, I do. She looked up, then eyes shining. Then how can you do this? Because I said I finally stopped confusing love with self-erasure. That landed. She swallowed. If the will goes through, what happens to us? Us. The word felt strange on my tongue. I don't know, I said honestly. That's not mine to decide. She stood abruptly, anger flaring through the grief. You always do this. You take the moral high ground and leave everyone else bleeding. I met her gaze. I spent my entire life bleeding quietly so you wouldn't have to. She stared at me, then laughed bitterly. You think this makes you better than us? No, I said, it makes me free. She left without saying goodbye. On the 12th day, the ruling came down. I was sitting at my kitchen table, laptop open but unread, when Margaret called. It's over, she said. My chest tightened, and the will stands, she continued, in full. I closed my eyes. The court found clear intent, no undue influence, and deliberate concealment by your mother. A sound escaped my throat that might have been a laugh or a sob. You are the sole beneficiary, Margaret said. The assets will be transferred accordingly. For a moment I couldn't speak. Not because of the money, because of the clarity. They knew, I whispered. They knew all along. Yes, she said gently. After we hung up, I sat very still. No fireworks, no victory music, just a quiet, irreversible shift. That evening, my parents came one last time. They didn't knock. They rang the bell and stood there rigidly when I opened the door. My mother looked defeated. My father looked furious. You've made your point, my father said. Now end this. There's nothing to end, I replied. My mother stepped forward. We raised you, she said. We sacrificed. And so did I said. Every time you asked me to be smaller so someone else could feel bigger. My father's voice rose. You're tearing this family apart. I shook my head. I stopped holding it together by myself. That's not the same thing. My mother's eyes filled. So that's it. Yes, I said. She nodded slowly, as if finally understanding something she didn't like. They left without another word. I closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. That night I poured a glass of wine and stood by the window watching the city lights flicker on. I thought of my grandmother, of her quiet strength, of the way she'd looked at me like I mattered. The inheritance wasn't revenge. It was recognition. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for permission to take up space. I already had. Winning didn't feel the way I thought it would. There was no rush of adrenaline, no cinematic sense of triumph. Just a quiet aftermath, like standing in a house after a storm has passed, counting what's still standing and what's gone for good. The first week after the ruling was consumed by logistics, calls with Margaret, paperwork, account transfers, appraisals. I learned the language of assets and trusts and fiduciary responsibility faster than I ever wanted to. Numbers that once felt abstract now had weight, history, consequence. The house in Maine was real. Older than I remembered, cedar shingled and weathered, sitting on land my grandfather had bought before I was born. I hadn't been there since I was a teenager, but when I saw the photos, something in my chest softened. I remembered summers there. Early mornings on the porch, with my grandmother, her knitting needles clicking softly while the fog rolled in off the water. She used to say that quiet was a kind of honesty. Now I understood what she meant. The company shares were more complicated. The manufacturing business had been run into the ground over the past few years, not by accident but by mismanagement and risk-taking I could trace back to my father's decisions. Debts were hidden, loans were stacked. The truth was ugly. Margaret was blunt. You can walk away, she said. Liquidate what you can and be done. I thought about it for a long time. Walking away had always been my role. Leave the mess. Spare everyone discomfort. Let someone else decide. This time I didn't. I want to see it through, I said. Not to punish anyone. To know what's real. She nodded. That will take strength. I have some now, I replied. The media interest flared briefly, then burned itself out. A few articles connected the wedding scandal to the inheritance ruling, spinning it into a cautionary tale about greed and family betrayal. Comment sections filled with strangers projecting their own wounds onto my story. Some called me heartless, some called me brave. Most didn't understand at all. I stopped reading after the first day. Emily texted once more. I don't recognize my life anymore. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Neither do I. But that doesn't mean it was ever what we thought. She didn't reply. My parents went silent completely. No calls, no emails, no attempts at reconciliation. In a strange way that hurt less than the constant pressure had. Silence, when chosen by both sides, can be a kind of boundary. I began packing my apartment in earnest, not out of urgency, but intention. I gave notice at the end of my lease. I sold furniture I didn't want to drag into a new chapter. I boxed up books and photos and the few things I had kept out of habit rather than love. When I flew to Maine for the first time in over a decade, the house greeted me with a familiar creak of floorboards and the smell of old wood and salt air. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, suitcase still in hand, and felt something shift. This place had never rejected me. I spent days walking the shoreline, cleaning out drawers, opening closets filled with coats that still carried my grandmother's perfume. I found letters tucked into books, recipes scribbled on index cards, photographs I'd never seen before. Proof of a woman who had watched quietly and chosen deliberately. One afternoon, while sorting through a stack of documents in the study, I found a sealed envelope with my name on it. Inside was a single letter. Claire. If you are reading this, it means I was right to trust you. I saw how they leaned on you, how they took your steadiness for granted. I worried about you long before I worried about money. I wanted you to have something that was not conditional on being agreeable or quiet. Do not let them make you feel guilty for receiving what was freely given. Love is not a debt. Grandma. I sat on the floor and cried, then the kind of crying that comes from release rather than pain. In the weeks that followed, I made decisions slowly and deliberately. I brought in an independent consultant to assess the company. The verdict was clear. It could be saved, but not without restructuring and transparency that would likely expose past mistakes. That exposure would implicate my father. Margaret didn't sugarcoat it. If you move forward, there may be legal consequences for him. I thought about the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had also taught me to stay quiet when his authority was challenged. The man who told me I was tearing the family apart when I stopped fixing his mistakes. I'm not protecting him anymore, I said. That was not revenge, that was accountability. When the notices went out, my father finally reached out. One email, short, controlled. You've made your choice. I replied with a single sentence. So did you. The process was messy, painful, necessary. Investigations widened. Old financial decisions were scrutinized. The company survived slimmer and cleaner, no longer a vehicle for ego or denial. I took no pleasure in the fallout, but I didn't look away. In the quiet moments, the doubt still crept in. Late at night, staring at the ceiling, I wondered if there had been another way, a softer one, a kinder one. Then I remembered all the times I had chosen softness at my own expense, how it had cost me my voice, my career, my sense of worth. This time I chose truth. By the end of the summer, I had settled into a rhythm I barely recognized as my own. Mornings by the water, afternoons working remotely, consulting on projects I chose rather than inherited. Evenings spent cooking simple meals and sitting with silence that no longer felt threatening. I wasn't lonely. I was alone in the way you are when you finally stop performing. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the water, my phone buzzed. A message from an unfamiliar number. This is your cousin Mara. I don't know if you remember me. I just wanted to say, I saw what you did. I wish I'd been brave enough to do it first. I smiled faintly and set the phone aside. The truth has a way of giving others permission. As the season turned, I realized the story wasn't finished yet. There was one final reckoning left. One moment that would define not what I had taken, but what I would no longer accept. And it was coming sooner than I thought. The last reckoning did not arrive with shouting or court orders. It arrived quietly, the way most truths do when they have nothing left to prove. It was early autumn in Maine, the kind of morning that feels suspended between seasons. The water lay flat and gray, the sky pale and undecided. I stood on the porch with a mug of coffee warming my hands, watching gulls trace lazy circles above the bay. For the first time in my life, no one was waiting for me to fix anything. My phone buzzed once. A message from my father. We need to talk. I stared at the words for a long moment. Months ago, they would have sent my stomach into knots. I would have rushed to respond, heart racing, already preparing myself to compromise, soften, surrender. This time I breathed. Then I replied with a single sentence. You can talk, I will listen, but I will not be blamed. There was a long pause, then another message. I'll come to Maine. 2 days later, he arrived alone. No mother at his side, no lawyer on speakerphone, no authority left to lean on. Just a tired man standing at the end of the gravel driveway, hands shoved into his coat pockets, looking older than I remembered. I didn't hug him. I didn't turn him away either. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where my grandmother used to roll out pie dough, sunlight spilling across its worn surface. He kept glancing around, taking in the house as if seeing it for the first time. She always loved this place, he said finally. Yes, I replied, she did. Silence stretched between us. It wasn't hostile, it was honest. I didn't know how to stop it, he said eventually. The way things turned out. I waited. He sighed. Your mother and I, we made choices. We thought we were doing what was best. For who, I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. When you were younger, he said you were so capable. You didn't need as much. There it was, the confession I had waited my whole life to hear. So you gave me less, I said. He nodded, eyes fixed on the table. We thought you'd be fine. I wasn't, I said. I was invisible. His shoulders slumped. I see that now, he said. Too late. I considered him carefully. This wasn't an apology, not yet. But it was the closest thing to accountability he had ever offered. I'm not here to punish you, I said, and I'm not here to rescue you. He looked up, then eyes sharp with fear. Then what do you want? The question surprised me with how little it stirred. I want you to understand, I said, that I won't carry this anymore. Not the guilt, not the responsibility for your choices, not the story where I'm the villain for telling the truth. He swallowed hard. And your mother, he asked? She made her choices, I said. So did you. He nodded slowly. When he left that afternoon, there were no promises made, no reconciliation declared. Just an acknowledgement of reality, fragile but real. It was enough. Later that week, Emily called. I almost didn't answer, almost. Her voice was softer now, stripped of its sharp edges. I'm moving, she said. Out of state. I need a clean start. I hope you find one, I replied. She hesitated. I don't know if we can ever be close again. I looked out at the water, steady and endless. Neither do I. Another pause. Then quietly, I'm sorry. It wasn't everything, but it was something. After we hung up, I sat on the porch as evening settled in the sky, deepening to blue. I thought about the years I had spent trying to earn love by shrinking myself. About how revenge had never been my goal, even when the story looked like one from the outside. This was never about taking from them. It was about stopping the taking of me. The company stabilized. I hired people smarter than me and listened to them. The house became a place of open doors and quiet mornings. Friends visited. Cousins I barely knew reached out. Conversations happened without manipulation or fear. My life grew wider instead of louder. One night I opened the journal I had started months earlier and wrote the last entry. I was not excluded because I was difficult. I was excluded because I could see clearly. I was not punished for speaking. I was punished because truth threatens comfortable lies. Revenge did not save me. Boundaries did. I closed the journal and set it aside. Some stories end with apologies, some end with forgiveness. Mine ended with choice. Choosing not to answer every call. Choosing not to explain myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. Choosing a life where love was not conditional on silence. If you are listening to this and you recognize yourself somewhere in my story, hear this. Being erased does not mean you were unimportant. Being blamed does not mean you were wrong. And choosing yourself does not make you cruel. It makes you free. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been excluded, overlooked, or punished for telling the truth, I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments. Your voice matters more than you were ever told. And if you want more stories like this, stories about justice, karma, and the quiet power of reclaiming your dignity, make sure you like, subscribe, and stay with me. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is not destruction. It is survival with your self-respect intact.